Crystal J, and this is Auntie Sermons, the podcast. I'm your auntie for the day. And these are not your grandpa's church sermons that you were forced to sit through on hard wooden pews. Auntie Sermons de-center men and asks women to step forward and take center stage. In this podcast, we're going to move through the Bible methodically and chronologically. We'll focus on every girl or girls, woman or women, named or unnamed, and let them tell us their stories. We'll examine rabbinic teachings, Christian interpretations, and the meanings of Hebrew names when they exist. Sometimes we'll step outside the traditional canon and explore other ancient texts, including the Ethiopian Bible. We'll talk about historicity, power, silence, and survival. But we'll also ask the most important question: what can we learn from these women today? So welcome to Auntie Sermons. Get out your Bible, or don't. Grab a highlighter, a notebook, something good to drink. Get comfortable. You might want some tissues. This is Auntie Sermons, the podcast, and I'm Crystal J, your host. This is Auntie Sermons, Episode 1, The Woman Who Knew Too Much. In this episode, we're talking about Eve. She is the first woman named and unnamed in the Bible. And for centuries, her story has been told as a warning. But today, we're going to take a different look. This is not the story of a foolish woman who failed a test. This is the story of a woman with a thirst for knowledge. And it's a story about what happens when systems built by men for men feel threatened by a woman who sees clearly. Patriarchal systems do not fear ignorance. They fear discernment. They fear curiosity. They fear a woman who asks the next question. One of the things we're told about Eve is that she brought sin into the world. But here's the question we rarely ask. Why is the desire to know treated as a crime only when it comes from a woman? Especially when later Jesus himself is described as taking on the sins of the world, sins Eve is blamed for carrying first. So what did Eve really do? And who benefited from telling her story the way it's been told? This is episode 1 of Auntie Sermons, The Woman Who Knew Too Much. The Woman Who Knew Too Much. Genesis 2:16 through 18, World English Bible. I will be using the World English Bible for this podcast because it is in the public domain. It is not my favorite version of the Bible. I would highly suggest that listeners use the New Revised Standard Version Updated Edition whenever possible. Genesis 2:16 through 18. Yahweh God commanded the man, saying, You may freely eat of every tree of the garden, but you shall not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for in the day that you eat of it, you will surely die. Yahweh God said, It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make him a helper, comparable to him. Genesis 3:1 through 6. Now the serpent was more subtle than any animal of the field which Yahweh God had made. He said to the woman, Has God really said, You shall not eat of any tree of the garden? The woman said to the serpent, Of the fruit of the tree of the garden we may eat. But of the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat of it, you shall not touch it, lest you die. The serpent said to the woman, You won't surely die, for God knows that in the day you eat it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She gave also to her husband with her, and he ate. Every time I return to this story, the story we were raised on, the story we were told explains everything wrong with humanity, I notice something nobody taught us to pay attention to. Eve never even got the instructions. The rule that the entire fate of humanity supposedly hinges on was spoken when she didn't even exist yet. God gives it to Adam. Adam hears it. Adam receives it. Adam is the one with the information, and Eve comes into the world afterward with no record of ever being taught what was forbidden. And yet, she becomes the one blamed for all of it. Isn't that something? From the very beginning, this story shows you exactly what kind of world it was written in. A world where men talk to men about rules for women, and then punish women for breaking rules they were never even included in. In church, we were told this meant women were easily deceived, that women were weak, that women need a man to tell them what's true. But when you read it honestly, Eve is not weak. Eve is curious. She wants to understand. The serpent doesn't tempt her with power or violence or cruelty. It tempts her with wisdom, with seeing clearly, with knowing more. In every other story in the Bible, seeking wisdom is praised. When Solomon asks for wisdom, God celebrates it. But when Eve reaches for the very same thing, the whole world crashes down on her. It isn't curiosity that's the problem in this story. It's that a woman is the one who possesses it. And what gets me is how familiar that still feels. How many times do we watch that dynamic play out today? A woman asks questions, seeks understanding, wants more than she's been handed, and suddenly she's rebellious. She's causing problems. She's stepping out of her place. It's the Eden story all over again, just in different clothes. It happened to me when I was young. When I was in the 6th grade, my teacher realized I was extremely smart and wanted me tested for the gifted program. But in the 1970s, girls weren't routinely tested for gifted education. So the school sent a letter home to my parents, and I still remember how it began. Dear Mr. and Mrs., your son has shown great intellectual ability. The entire letter talked about me using masculine pronouns. The secretary didn't even bother to use whiteout or type a new copy. They just assumed that gifted meant boy. I ended up being the first girl in my entire elementary school to be tested for the gifted program, and instead of feeling proud, I remember feeling sad. Because all I could think was, how many brilliant girls came through that school before me? How many of them were never even considered, not because they weren't smart enough, but because they weren't boys? And that right there is the spirit of the Eden story. Eve reaches for wisdom and is punished for it. Girls reach for excellence and are ignored for it. Women try to understand and are told they are being difficult. The world has always been threatened by the curiosity of women. And then we look at Adam. The moment things go wrong, he doesn't stand with her. He doesn't take responsibility. He doesn't say, we made this choice together. No, he looks God straight in the face and says, the woman you gave me, she did it. And God accepts that excuse. The very first time anything goes wrong in the Bible, a man shifts blame onto a woman, and the system backs him up. That's not divine justice. That's patriarchy. That's storytelling designed to protect the authority of men at the expense of women. And it goes even further. The story rewrites biology. Suddenly, the man becomes the origin of life, the first human, the one with seed, even though we know scientifically that the seed is the ovum carried by women. Women create life. Women nourish life. Women literally carry the future inside them. But a world run by men couldn't stand that. So they took the power of creation away from women in their own myth and handed it to a man made from dirt. Eve wasn't the downfall of humanity. Eve was the first woman punished for thinking for herself. Eve wanted wisdom, and the world wasn't ready for a woman who knew too much. So when I look at Eve now, I do not see the fall of man. I see the rise of womanhood. I see the first moment when a woman acts from her own mind, her own curiosity, her own desire to understand. And I see a story desperately trying to warn every other woman not to do the same. But we're still here, still questioning, still learning, still refusing to shrink. And that alone is proof that the story didn't work. Thank you so much for listening to Auntie Sermons. If this episode resonated with you, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share it with a friend or two. If you'd like to financially support the podcast, you can find those links in the show notes. You can also find me online. I am Crystal J, all one word, J-A-E, on both YouTube and TikTok. So come say hi, or argue politely, or you could just lurk. I see you. And remember, this is Auntie Sermons. We bring the tea, we question the story, and we absolutely do not apologize for it. Fuck the patriarchy. I'll see you next time. Don't forget, I'm a nice lady.